Last time, on a Brony at Canterlot High.
What happens if a piece of media happens to challenge these concepts, these ideals, characters we can often relate to or have a sense of familiarity with? I believe Brandon as a character is meant to encapsulate this feeling, as I believe Brandon is meant to be a character that represents not Brandon, but the viewer themselves. In the words of philosopher Pythagoras Plato, being reborn is the philosophical or religious concept that non-material essence of a living being begins a new lifespan in a different physical form or body after biological death. In a separate video series created by Brandon known as Our Mini Brony, it is revealed in episode 3 that Brandon's human body on Earth is dead. For there to be a concept of an afterlife or religion, the idea of a soul needs to exist. Something beyond the human body. If the sky were to suddenly open up, there would be no law, there would be no rule, there would only be you and your memories, the choices you've made, and the people you've touched. You may be asking yourself, why am I trying to explain a completely separate show created by Brandon? I believe this is a reflection of the real actual Brandon's inner thoughts. A concept of a perfect world is equestria to him. If the sky were to open up, you'd be left with a reflection of your brain. And what does his brain cling to? My Little Pony. In a few personal interviews with Brandon, he directly brings up the fact he's attempted to lucid dream into Equestria. The concept of a lucid dream is when somebody is aware they are currently in a dream, giving them full range access to do literally whatever they want. If you don't really see where I'm going with this, I'm kind of comparing the state of being dead to being in a dream. It is a reflection of your mind, the closest thing we have to being dead in this universe outside of actually dying. I should probably note this is not a reflection of how I see the concept of death. Rather, it is an explanation of how death works in this universe, strung together by a bunch of hints or things Brandon has said in his previous content. Now, you might be wondering, what was the point of that weird rant? Well, this brings me to kind of a theory I've had about the series. Brandon is dead.
I too have been touched by the devilish one. Tattoo on the left shoulder. Oh, but when I saw the face of God, I was changed.
To emphasize more of what I just said, we're gonna have to actually start the episode in the analysis. Our last episode ended with Lightning Star, some random woman taking in Brandon from off the streets, adopting Brandon within minutes of meeting him. Episode 2 starts off with the last episode ending, Brandon awaking in Lightning Star's house, before Brandon is later introduced to his adoptive father, Flameblitz. Before getting ready for his first day in this new school, his mother seemingly just enrolled him. These first 4 to 5 minutes alone have a lot to unpack. I should probably mention Brandon uses the last aforementioned writing style of trying to create a sense of formality with the new place. Despite being in a quite literally different dimension, it's still written in a way to make the viewer feel at ease. Going out of its way to do the arbitrary decision of directly focusing on small details that would be considered just out of place to create a sense of formality with the audience.
He also made sure to put his phone in his pocket. It was the Pineapple Phone 12 Pro. Not the newest, but still fairly recent.
You might be asking, why do I believe Brandon would be doing this? Trying to create a sense of ease and formality with a place the audience is not familiar with. I say this because I believe we're supposed to, as the audience, be viewing this through Brandon's perspective. He is projecting his normal everyday routine, or normal living style. For him to act crazy or shocked about all these new changes would break this immersion. You cannot have a fantasy of a perfect world without living through a world that is imperfect to you. You kind of have to experience flaws to fix flaws. Two characters that directly encapsulate what I'm referring to here are the character Flameblitz and Lightning Star. Now, I'm going to try treading around this topic kind of lightly because, again, I don't know Brandon personally, nor do I know any of his family personally, but according to Brandon himself, he apparently does not have the best relationship with his two actual parents in real life. Lightning Star and Flameblitz encapsulate what the media portrays as a perfect nuclear household. something you see in a majority of sitcoms or TV shows portraying a happy family, a white, high-class suburban household. These characters a lot of the time encapsulate something the majority of people desire, something they want, materialism. They want to buy more. They want to be like these people. However, it's impossible. These depictions in media being a reflection of our own world. However, it's changed. It's flawless, an unattainable escapist fantasy. These tropes and cliches in your everyday media have been boiled down in this series purposely, I believe, to give a perspective on Brandon's mindset, what he wants. You want further proof? Just look at how everything played out. In real life, the adoption process can take anywhere between months and years. A person needing to fill out mountains and mountains worth of paperwork to prove they are mentally confident enough to take care of a child. In this series, Brandon's adoptive mother takes him in within minutes. Two other things I want to point out that kind of add to this theory include how people interact with Brandon and the fact the school just kind of accepted him. That's not really how that works. You normally get a little heads up before you're just enrolled. He got adopted and enrolled in school within the same day, happening within a matter of hours to minutes. You could make the argument Lightning Star works for the school, which is kind of why that happens. But I also want to directly point out that's still not how that works. Now, another question you might be asking me is, why am I focusing on this theory so much? Well, I believe this theory might be basis for what Brandon is trying to do within this series. It might be a level of commentary he's trying to convey, the content we see purposely using tropes to criticize or satirize how media portrays the average suburban community. After Brandon is driven to school, he gets reintroduced to his friend, Sunset Shimmer, somebody who is established that Brandon has a crush on. Brandon presumably again does try to create a sense of familiarity of the place, going into weird details with going on an extended scene of Brandon and Princess Celestia, or Principal Celestia, because she's the principal, whatever, enrolling him in classes. The only sense of shock Brandon has to not having a completely new family or being in a completely new universe is his pure reaction to a level, or to his already level of familiarity with Canterlot High from, like the TV show Equestria Girls. Even going out of its way to show an extended scene of the principal explaining history of this new universe. Something completely arbitrary. However, I do believe it is a well-done scene because it portrays how nonsensical it kind of is, and it does a good job of presenting how kind of confusing that is to Brandon, as an extension, the viewer themselves. As the bell rings, Brandon and Sunset walk down to lunch as he's introduced to the main six. He kindly introduces himself before announcing he is a big fan of them and has heard so much about them. Reasonably, a few of the characters are a little confused by this because, how the hell does he know? Brandon, being overwhelmed by the scenario, just kind of blurts out the fact, yo, I'm from a different universe. Literally everything begins to freeze, even people who are not even in the conversation. However, the main six accept this explanation relatively fast. I was going to go into a little rant about how I believe this could also add to the death conspiracy theory I've been making up, but it's been canonic in this show. They've dealt with dimensional travel, so I guess they're somewhat used to it. However, their reaction is still not necessarily normal. Regardless if you've dealt with something like that before, it's still pretty crazy if somebody just went up to you and was like, hey, I'm from a separate universe, especially somebody you just met. In the first Equestria Girls film, it took Twilight actual days and days to build up the courage to announce this to them, and even then they were pretty skeptical of it. The only time they accepted it was when, the dog spoke.
You see, you're from an alternate world and you're a pony princess there, and the crown actually has a magical element embedded in it that helps power up other magical elements, and without it, they don't work anymore, and you need them to help protect your magical world. And if you don't get the crown tonight, you'll be stuck in this world, and you won't be able to get back for like a really, really long time. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that isn't the reason. Nope, she's pretty much spot on.
Adding insult to injury, Brandon announces the fact that they are in a TV show in his universe. This is where I start to kind of not believe their reactions. Most of them seem to be genuinely just overjoyed by this fact, not really questioning it, just straight up believing it. I believe purposely, again, trying to reflect Brandon's mindset. If they overreact to this information, these caricatures he's created at these characters would end up breaking the immersion for Brandon, as an extension, the viewer themselves. To be fair, I'm not 100% sure. I've only really seen the main series, aka the pony version of the show. Brandon himself most likely has a better understanding of how these characters work. Also, this isn't me saying the scene is bad by any means. I feel like the uncomfortableness and kind of cringeworthy factor that Brandon has to just blurting all this out is done really well. Again, we're seeing it through the perspective of Brandon, so yeah, the level of being uncomfortable is translated to the audience pretty well, and is overall one of the much better done scenes in the series so far. The scene plays out with Sideswipe and Brandon having a little conversation contrasting the two universes, with Rainbow Dash interrupting to tease Sideswipe. The group decides to set up a studying party to help Brandon out. Brandon decides to call up his adoptive mother before hearing two slight voices in the background, before the episode ends with the reveal that she had adopted two other children. My overall thoughts on this episode are a little bit mixed. Overall, I enjoyed it. I think it improved on a lot of things the previous episode did. However, it still did carry a lot of the same issues as the first episode. Although I understand it's important to create a sense of familiarity so we understand where Brandon's coming from and we understand it through Brandon's perspective, sometimes I think it just goes a little overboard. There are a lot of scenes of just kind of out of place of them just explaining random details. Now, I do understand it is, I believe at least, it is a deliberate decision to kind of create this sense of, this normality with this new universe. It gets a tad bit tedious at times with Brandon kind of, or at least the viewer, going through weird spaces of just listening to the teacher, explain history. Although I do get the artistic reason why it's there, it still goes on for an extended amount of time, being a little tedious to watch. The character interactions are normally what sells the show for me. Normally I like shows to see how characters react, and I gotta say, I think it did pretty solid. Outside of the somewhat weird reactions I pointed out from the characters, I feel like the bitter and small talk between them seems natural and enjoyable. Brandon has done a pretty good job of setting up the place. He's set up the world, how the characters interact, and he's overall set it up pretty damn well. I'm kind of excited to see what he's going to do with these characters in more future episodes. Oh, by the way, a little side note, apparently Brandon disproved my dead theory. Oops.